This video is all about clipping and notching on corners and curves. When you're turning over seams, you run across points when you just simply can't fold the fabric, so you need to make a cut. So when you've got a curve, you make a simple straight cut, just like that. I've cut down the seam allowance here, so that there's less bulk when you fold. And for very pointy corners, you need to blunt the end. So I've simply snipped off the corner here. So cutting it down to the seam allowance. I've just blunted the end. You need to leave yourself enough room so that you can make a mitred corner, which is a nice fold that isn't going to fray at all. So fold the fabric over just a little ways, and then see here it's got the clip. In fact, it's probably better to do it in this corner. Fold the fabric over, and then I can fold down one side and down the other. If I can just get my fingers out of the way, you'll see that makes a really neat, not too bulky fold, ready for this can be used for applique and patchwork work, but also just general pattern cutting to make a nice sharp edge. So that is clipping a curve. On a really big curve like this, takes more drastic measures. So you cut right into the centre. This line would mark the edging of my stay stitches. So of course be careful not to snip over the stay stitch. It's not the end of the world if you do, but it's just try not to. I'm showing on paper just because it's I find it a bit more clear for demonstrations, because it doesn't flop. So I'm making small clips. I'm going to show you corners again. So this one I'm going to clip right the way to the end, ignoring that this is a corner rather than a curve, and I'll show you the difference. And then I'm going to leave a good bit on this corner. We cut away the excess to stop the bulk, and then we fold them under. So I folded under the clipped curve. The more severe the curve, the closer together you do your clips. It becomes quite obvious when you start folding over. Now then, these corners, this one I've clipped right to the end just to show you other ways of mitring. And sometimes if you've made your own shape, you just do have to freestyle it and trust yourself a little. So I'm just going to give myself a 5mm seam allowance to work with, more like I would use for fabric. And so traditionally I would blunt this corner and mitre it by folding over that blunted edge and folding the sides as I showed you before. See the benefit of showing you with paper, because it holds the fold. Little crease. And that actually has a little tiny bit of bulge there, so that could be cut down further. Now this one, because I cut the clips right the way to the end, because there was more of a curve on this side, I'm going to have to come up with a different way of doing it. If this was just removed and I folded it under, there would be potential for fraying. And it's not the end of the world. I would just need to sew a few stitches over on each corner. And in fact some people recommend that you do anyway on all sharp corners, sew over a few stitches just to prevent fraying further down the line. So I could do that, or another option might be to fold this in and then fold it under. I'd have to fold it diagonally to match that to match that angle this way, and then it becomes invisible in the fold. Or not. It's a more of a bulky way, so it feels like the best thing to do would just be to remove this entirely and fold and fold. So when you've got a really an awkward angle, you just need to experiment a bit and see what works for you to get that neat fold. And if it comes down to it and your fabric does get a bit tufty, you can always sew over. So if I were just to fold this over, I would have to fold it in no regular pattern multiple times, and it would get quite bulky and creased up at the back. If I were to clip it, you quickly see how the clip actually folds over each other and makes a V shape on top of each other. So that's why we're doing a curve. We put a little notch in so that when you fold it over, the fabric will lie flat on the back. And again, the more severe the outer curve, the more notches you put in. So I'm going to go ahead now and get this snowflake ready for the next stage of applique.